Well, if you listen to the likes of those generals in military class that are paid to go on to Fox News or MSNBC or CNN, they're on the payroll, of course, and they certainly love war. Well, you'd certainly learn that Russia is collapsing or losing badly on the battlefield, running out of weapons, running out of fuel, running out of time. Here's just a few examples over the past few days. General Jack Keane, who you see there on your screen, former Army Vice Chief of Staff. Well, on October 25th, he said that Russia has completely stalled in their military advances over the past year and sustained massive casualties. And just a few days ago, he said, we're far from this war ending. Russia hasn't changed its goals, but advances are not possible to defeat Ukraine. So advances are not possible by Russia to defeat Ukraine. Okay, again, this is like a paid guy who's on Fox News payroll on television telling you the truth about Russia. Okay, this is why so many people are misinformed. Here is General Christopher Cavoli, active U.S. Army general, not retired as of November 2025, Supreme Allied Commander of Europe in NATO. In a Senate hearing, he said that Russia's ground forces have decreasing quality overall and isolated areas of strength, but no momentum, no broad momentum. He described 2025 advances as not like Pearl Harbor, emphasizing slow progress due to unanticipated high losses. So basically, Ukraine's innovations in drones and defenses are just stopping the Russians in their track. No momentum at all. But how's this for momentum? A new report out this week shows just how much momentum Russia actually does have. In just the past 5 weeks, Russia has now captured 86 villages or settlements. Call them towns, villages, cities. 86 of them in the past 5 weeks. And you can see it's not just in one little area. It's all over the map, completely surrounding Ukrainian forces. 86 of them. Just you can see the Ukrainian defenses just melting away. And a few hours ago, Trump's team just arrived for peace talks in Moscow. Jared Kushner has now joined the ranks, and they are in Moscow this evening. We want to bring in Colonel Douglas Macgregor now to talk all about this. Where do things stand? Well, these TV generals who are making money telling us that Russia is losing this war, General. I know you got a good laugh out of that. Good to see you.
Well, it's nice to see you. I love your fireplace. I can feel toasty warm just watching it. It's really good.
Love the ambiance.
Are you under snow right now?
We have a little snow. We have a snow warning, a heavy snow warning right now, actually, here in the Rocky Mountains. So
I was going to say, yeah, it's about time for you to be hit hard.
Yeah,
well, speaking of being hit hard, anybody that listens to this stuff is probably being hit very hard over the head and needs to wake up. Pokrovsk capture and effectively the collapse of the Ukrainian front in and around Pokrovsk is the death knell of the Ukrainian army. Ukrainians have been taking horrendous casualties, thousands and thousands. Thousands of Ukrainian troops are surrendering. And what we're learning is that large numbers of these troops have had maybe a week in uniform before they were sent to the front.
Wow.
So unsurprisingly, large numbers of them are simply surrendering because they know they're going to be annihilated. The Russians have never had as a goal the conquest of Ukraine and its territory. They were only interested in the territory in Ukraine that was historically Russian and populated with Russian speakers. So once they captured most of that, they established a strategic defense. And our brilliant leaders in NATO advised the Ukrainians to throw themselves against these defenses. And these are not defenses like the ones that we saw, say, at Normandy. You're talking about a very complex integration of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms with multiple strike platforms on the ground, in the air, at sea. We're talking about rocket artillery, missiles of all kinds, as well as conventional artillery, all the way down to mortars. And they have the gift of precision, which 25, 30 years ago they didn't have. They have it now. And so they have been able to annihilate hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian troops. The war is tactically and on the battlefield, I would argue, strategically lost. But as long as the Russians do not advance to the Dnieper River, which I think is now imminent, people are going to continue to insist that the Russians are losing and ineffective or can't do the job. Right now, the Russian casualties and losses are probably in the realm of 130, 140,000 total. Ukrainians are now up to 1.8 million. This is no contest. It's tragic that we don't get the truth. We're not alone. Most of the Europeans aren't being told the truth. But in Washington, D.C., in the globalist governmental environment, it is the narrative that is rewarded, not the truth. And the narrative doesn't have to be true. It just has to be repeated often and sound convincing. And that's what you've got. But this war is effectively now at a terminal point. And I think that's why you see in an act of desperation, frankly, Witkoff and Kushner, neither of whom are credentialed members of the State Department or the administration, rushing over to Moscow to try and rescue the situation for Trump. What Donald Trump wants is an optical illusion. He wants an event that shows him as having contributed to peace breaking out all over. I think it's going to be tough to get it. I'm sure the Russians will try to oblige because they would like nothing better than for this war to be over. But unfortunately, the Europeans and the Zelensky government itself don't seem to be willing to cooperate. So I don't know that we can expect much to come out of it.
Let's talk more about our other favorite impotent power structure, NATO. We've talked about how the United States is sort of cosplaying that they have a role in peace, even as they continue to send Ukrainians to their death. Although, let me ask this in a two-part question. Ukrainian prosecutors say they have over 300,000 desertion cases, which may mean that this advance for Russia does not come at the expense of human life. So what's your take on that? And what's your take on the fact that the U.S. is skipping the NATO meeting next weekend because that is equally pointless?
Yeah, it is. NATO is disintegrating. We're trying to maintain this facade that such an alliance actually exists and is meaningful. But if you look at Berlin right now and Germany is like a volcano that is beginning to erupt. The anger, the frustration, the hatred that the population feels for the government in Berlin cannot be overstated. And the right, nationalist right in Germany is growing by leaps and bounds and is being joined, interestingly enough, by the far left nationalists. So I think it's only a matter of time until Merz is gone. And of course, in an effort to create the illusion that they are doing something that is going to change the outcome in Ukraine, they're now spending like drunken sailors on the military industrial base in the hopes that this will persuade people there's something real about it. Situation in Paris is not a whole lot better. Starmer in London is about to go under. All you have to do is look at the true state of the economies. The economies are in desperate condition. So the facade is crumbling. And it makes good sense not to bother going to this NATO meeting because you're not going to get anything out of it. People that are in power right now in NATO are really enemies of peace because they know the outbreak of peace, the admission of failure, means the end of this globalist elite's tenure in power. So that's a foregone conclusion.
So you guys have heard of the bearskin hoodie, right? It's my favorite hoodie. It's the one I'm wearing right now with the removable patches on the side. This thing is built like a tank. This thing is incredibly warm when I walk the dog. It just turned really cold. We got a big cold front that came down from Wyoming. So it's a perfect season to wear your hoodie. And Bearskin makes these fantastic hoodies that are built like a tank with 340 GSM microfleece, 10 pockets, a clean, rugged fit that looks awesome. And right now is the best time to grab it because you get 60% off. Right now, they're running a deal for our viewers, 60% off. This is a perfect gift for the upcoming holidays. And this thing looks awesome. It feels great. It zips right into the heavy rainstorm jacket also. So if you're out, you know it's going to pour down rain, you slide the shell right over the top of it, and the Velcro, just perfect. It just works. It's 100% waterproof when you need it. So if it turns wet, cold, windy, you're not scrambling last minute. You'll get free U.S. shipping, fast delivery, and you've locked in your winter gear already. That's a win-win. So do yourself a favor right now. Text the word redacted to 36912 to lock in 60% off. Again, text the word redacted to 36912. You'll get a link sent straight to your phone so you can check it later if you're busy right now. Oh, and one more thing I should mention. When you support Bearskin, you're also supporting the fallen outdoors and the Hope for the Warriors Veterans Program. So you're not just buying some great gear for yourself, you're actually backing a cause that matters as well. So don't wait till you're freezing to realize that your hoodie sucks. Get a Bearskin right now while it's 60% off. Text the word redacted to 36912.
But how do you pull back their military-industrial complex, which now has sold the European people expanded military budget, this idea that they can now build an economy based on weaponry, this idea that now they need a surveillance state? The people of Europe are still going to continue to lose, even if NATO's role here is absolutely unnecessary.
Well, a couple of things to keep in mind is just spending money doesn't produce military power. I know Americans don't understand that. Americans think that the Department of Defense is sort of a giant Walmart. You walk in and you pick stuff off the shelf, you pay for it, and instantly you have military power. It takes time to build military power. You have to have a lot of trained manpower. When you go on the ground, and that's really what we're talking about, because you're dealing with a continental power in Russia. And it's a continental power like no other, as has been demonstrated throughout its history. They field enormous forces, and these forces are actually today very, very good. They have a lot of trained manpower that is competently led, well equipped, and well organized. But it takes time to do that. When you build a formation, a battalion of, say, 600-700, a brigade of, say, 4,000 to 5,000 to 6,000, it takes a long time for those soldiers to live together, to work together, to train together, to become effective, to become comfortable with the weaponry that they've been given. It takes on average about 10 years to build an army. So stop and consider that. The Germans had almost no army at all at the beginning of this war. So they're looking at 7 or 8 years before they see anything of value really emerge. And what they're trying to do is take factories that once built automobiles and say, okay, now you're going to build military equipment. Maybe you're going to build armored fighting vehicles or something else. Well, that's not a long-term solution to the German economic problem. Military equipment has very limited utility in the sense that there's no salvage value unless you can sell it to somebody else after you're through with it. And when you do that, you're not going to get much back from your initial investment. In other words, what the Europeans need, what the Germans in particular need, is to rebuild a functioning commercial economy with a scientific industrial base that can sustain the standard of living. That's something you cannot do with this military power. All they'll do is sink themselves deeper into debt and destroy the living standards of the Germans. The Germans know that. They're figuring it out. That's why Germany right now is a pot on the fire, and it's bubbling over. And it's only a matter of time until Merz and his friends are gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep focusing on Germany, very, very important. I also want to focus on this 28-point peace plan. So we saw Kushner, we saw Witkoff there. Putin has said it's worth looking at, this 28-point plan framework here. Do you think there's any meat on that bone? And do you think we'll see anything substantive from these quote-unquote peace talks?
The Russians have made very clear what their bottom line requirements are. Everybody knows that. Those are not going to change. So if anything comes out of this 28-point plan that has become a 19-point plan, that's probably going to become an 11-point plan, it either looks a lot like what Putin has been saying for months or years, or it's just going to be kicked to the curb. Keep something in mind. Putin and Lavrov both understand what Trump wants. He wants good optics. He wants the optical illusion that he has been the creator of peace and goodwill and so forth. They want to help him. They'll be happy to throw him a bone. I don't think there's going to be any meat on it. I don't think it's going to be very meaningful. But at this stage, they're willing to toss him a bone to get this thing over with. The problem is President Trump should be the leader of NATO. He's not. He abdicated his responsibility as the leader of NATO when he said, okay, fine, we'll sell you whatever equipment you have. You may not see it for 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, but if you want to buy it and continue this war in Ukraine, you may do so. Well, that was a serious mistake because that essentially gave license to the Europeans to ignore us. and to do whatever they wanted. Germany is going to be the first to leave NATO. Once this government changes, that's the end of NATO for Germany. Then it's going to leave the EU. Germany leaves the EU. That's the end of the EU. That's not going to be meaningful either. Everybody knows that in the globalist camp. So the effort right now is to prevent that from happening. I don't know that President Trump understands that, and it may be that he's reached a conclusion he doesn't care. But the problem with that is if you don't care, these people are capable of stupid actions. And that's why Putin made the statement earlier today, in fact, I think a few hours ago, excuse me, saying, look, if you are stupid enough to challenge us to go to war, we can change from this special military operation with very limited objectives to war, real war. We have the manpower. We can replace our losses. We can field the forces. We have the missiles. We have the artillery ammunition. We have the capabilities we need, and we will crush you. He's right. Europeans can't compete in this. We don't want to. What President Trump has failed to do as the president of the United States and the leader of NATO is to say, damn it, we don't want a war with Russia. That's not in our interest. It's not in yours. So shut up, sit down, and listen. We are going to make peace with Russia. We're going to put something on the table, and you're going to sign up for it. Because if you don't, you will face Russia on your own. They can't do that.
Well, now to Venezuela. New unconfirmed reports today that the CIA and U.S. Special Forces were outed, trying to basically capture or kill Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. All of this comes as the United States military now, according to the latest numbers, has 15,000 troops in the region, 11 battleships. Probably that's very, very low and conservative number that we're hearing about. Colonel Douglas Macgregor, host of the National Conversation, joins us again here on the show to talk about the latest developments. First of all, Colonel, good to see you. Let's talk about the CIA piece of this first. We know from our own reporting and confirmation here on this show that CIA has been actively involved in regime change operations there for many, many years. This is not a surprise at all. And we also know that the U.S. Special Forces have been there and, in fact, clashing with the CIA in years past. I can confirm on this show that members of the U.S. Special Forces were killed in these clashes as a result of what the CIA did to them. So this is not new, but what is your take on this going after Maduro in the past 48 hours?
Well, it's turning into a clown show. The fact that we're here talking about it, it's public knowledge, and that we know it's failed is not a good thing. This is the sort of thing that if it is even remotely effective, nobody knows about it, Clayton. Right. Unfortunately, we failed at this task so many times. This goes back to Hugo Chavez. We have always wanted to replace the government in Venezuela with a government that would do what we want. And what do we want from the government of Venezuela? Well, not only do we want access to the numerous resources, the oil, the gas, the gold mines, the emeralds, lithium, rare earths, and the rest of it. We want them to stop supporting or assisting other nations in the region, especially Cuba, that's very dependent on lots of cheap energy just to survive. Cuba is on its last legs, incidentally. It's really in poverty and suffering terribly. And we have people in the administration that think this is wonderful timing because not only could they bring down the regime in Venezuela, they could bring down the regime in Cuba and potentially in other states. I think they're delusional. But this is not unusual inside the Beltway in Washington. And right now, the whole idea is that you launch a coup, you replace Maduro at the top. Now, Maduro is not stupid. He doesn't sleep in the same place every night. He doesn't use the same phone. He moves around frequently. He's surrounded by very fine bodyguards, some of whom are Russian, some of whom are Cuban, some of whom are other kinds of mercenaries. The Russians have helped the Venezuelans a great deal, and the Russians have been paid in gold for it. People don't understand that. The Chinese are a little less enthusiastic because Maduro owes them a lot of money and hasn't paid them. I guess my point is the theory is that we can rush into Venezuela, we can install this new government, and then the thousands of troops that you're mentioning, most of whom are sitting up in Puerto Rico, can be brought in as a stabilization force to maintain peace and order while the country changes governments, and that this new government will induce loyalty to itself and to us. I think it's a very, very slender reed from which to suspend any military plans, because I'm not sure any of that is attainable. And this is the big problem. I spoke recently with someone who spent 9 years of his life down in Venezuela. He's an intelligence officer. And he said, Doug, these people are not going to roll over for us. They may not necessarily all love Maduro, but they're not going to accept somebody shoved down their throats. And they're increasingly gaining support from all of their neighbors, even Colombia. The Colombians don't particularly like Venezuela, but the Colombians and the Brazilians and others are all willing to pitch in and help, which means that, let's assume we get ashore, the Marines take the airport right on the coast very quickly, and then we start flying in troops, and those troops then start spreading around, preparing to go to Caracas, and then we start losing people. The question is, how many Americans in uniform can you lose before someone on the Hill or someone in the media finally says, wait a minute, we didn't sign up for this. This is turning into a disaster. What do you need for a disaster? One Chinook helicopter, one UH-60, who knows how many, carrying troops that suddenly are shot out of the air. Can we identify all the air and missile defenses? Can we identify the placement of all the radars? Can we find all the strike weapons that can be aimed at the ships at sea? In other words, what's the tolerance for casualties and losses in Washington? I don't think it's very great, Clayton.
Well, let's ask just real quick, let's ask our audience right now, and we'll come back to it at the end of this segment. How many of you would support Americans being killed in Venezuela? We'll just ask our chat room. We're live on Rumble and YouTube and X.
For the purpose of
regime change. It doesn't really doesn't matter, right? Regime change, a new government, deposing Maduro.
Well, it matters what they're selling us. They're selling us an idea that you're saving some nice suburban mom from her son drug overdosing. That's
right.
That's what I mean. It's so far-fetched. It's so stupid that I don't know who would.
Look, Natalie, you're right. All you have to do is go on the website for the Drug Enforcement Agency. Read the reports that are posted there. They'll tell you that less than 4% of the quote-unquote drugs, that's cocaine and other things, come out of Venezuela. And by the way, most of it ends up in Africa or Europe. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't care at all, but what I'm trying to say is this business of mentioning fentanyl, which comes overwhelmingly, practically 100% out of Mexico and kills hundreds of thousands of American citizens, that's a different kettle of fish. The question should be, if it's coming out of Mexico, what are we doing about it? Why are we sailing all the way down to the Caribbean basin to deal with Venezuela? Well, that's because this is not about drugs. This is about resources and oil. And also we want to exclude China, Russia, Iran, or anybody else we don't like from doing business in the Western Hemisphere. We've never had much competition in the Western Hemisphere. All of a sudden, we have to compete. We don't want to compete. We want to enjoy the spoils as the major power. This is going to backfire on us. People that would normally not have paid any attention to Russia or China or anybody else are now going to turn around and say, we'd much rather do business with you than the Americans who invade our countries. So this is a dumb idea. I see no upside. I think President Trump should go public tomorrow morning. He should announce and say, look, I've reconsidered all of this. I had a good conversation this morning with President Maduro. I think we've come to a solution. We are going to stand down, and there will be no military intervention in Venezuela. And by the way, I'll have some new names for announcement next week as new secretaries of defense and secretaries of state and new people for the NSC staff. That's what he should do. And that's what JFK did after the Bay of Pigs and after the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's what Eisenhower did. He said, the hell with Korea, I'm out. No. And that's what we should do. But I don't think he will.
If you've been seriously injured, your case could be worth millions, and you should know exactly what your rights are. That's why I want to tell you about Morgan & Morgan. They're America's largest injury law firm with over 1,000 attorneys working in all 50 states. And unlike a lot of firms that settle quickly, Morgan & Morgan doesn't take lowball offers from insurance companies. Just in the past few months, they won $12 million in Florida when the insurance company offered only $350,000. And in New York, they secured $6.8 million on a case where the offer was just $275,000. And the best part, it's absolutely free unless you win. Insurance companies try to pay out as little as possible. Morgan & Morgan fights to get you more if you become their client. It only takes a few minutes to see if you have a case, and you can do it right from your phone. It's that easy. You can visit forthepeople.com/redacted, or you can click the link in the description to get started.
Last time we spoke to you, just before the Thanksgiving break, we talked about, Philip asked this question. We're bombing people we don't know are guilty of anything. Why are there not mechanisms inside the military saying, no, we're not going to do this. We don't know who these people are. It's unethical. And you had mentioned that there is sort of a chain of command for this. There is a way. Well, then the next day, Democrats said something similar, and the president called it treason. And it became this whole thing, right? That, oh my gosh, the president's threatening us. But what the heart of the conversation was something we had talked about in earnest, is like, maybe we should not, just follow orders to kill like Nazis. So can you respond to that? What are the mechanisms under which someone inside the military can say, we need to stop killing civilians without any proof of guilt?
Well, the first point I think we need to mention is that those Democrats that made this little video were not concerned with that at all. They were simply trying to undermine the authority of the commander-in-chief, who happens to be Trump, because they hate Trump.
Yeah, score political points. Score
right.
political points, yeah.
Yeah, let's distance ourselves from them. We're asking this question sincerely.
Yes. Yeah, and right now we need to understand the following. I know from personal experience in the Army, and it's not limited to the Army, the Marines go through this, everybody does. You go through hundreds of hours routinely every year where you discuss the law of war, what is legal and what is not legal. People understand the definition of an illegal order because they understand what the law of war means. You do not shoot prisoners. You do not mistreat prisoners. You do not harm prisoners. You protect them. You do not kill civilians. If you know that they are there and you can avoid doing so, you don't fire. You don't do those things. Now, we all know that even under the best of circumstances, and by the way, I've said this before, and I mean this, the Russians have done this very well. Even under the best of circumstances, you're still going to kill some civilians who happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But it's not something that should ever be deliberate. Now, and the Russians have avoided that, and they've been accused of terrible things they're not guilty of. Ukrainians, on the other hand, have done terrible things, both to prisoners as well as to civilians that are Russians inside Ukraine. Now, as far as we're concerned, what we've just seen with this recent incident is the following. Allegedly, and I say allegedly because I don't have all the facts, the admiral of the fleet, who is in charge down there, whoever he is, received an order from, allegedly, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War. And the Secretary of War was asked specifically, I guess, there are 2 people that were not killed in the latest strike, and they're hanging on to the vessel. And he said, kill them all, supposedly. We don't want any survivors. We're at war. These are narco-terrorists and so forth. The admiral then complied, allegedly. That order went down the line. Now, are there people in that chain of command who know that this is an illegal order? I'm sure there are. It was illegal. The admiral could have done a number of different things. I've seen this, by the way, not in this exact setting, but the admiral could have said, sir, that's, technically speaking, that's a violation of the law of war. And then if he received a direct verbal order from the Secretary of War to execute and do it, he could do one of 2 things. He could say, sir, I cannot do that. My conscience won't permit me to do so. And by the way, it was Frederick the Great of Prussia back in the 1700s who established the rule that if your conscience will not permit you to execute an order, then you can retire or leave the service without prejudice. We do have a similar tradition as a result of von Steuben, who founded the Army. But my point is, the admiral could have also said, sir, I will execute this order under duress, and I will send forward a notification that I executed this order over my objections and over my view that this is not legal. He could have done that. I don't know what he did. Mm-hmm. Apparently, at least from the reports we're getting, he didn't do anything.
Right.
And when you're at the lower level, you get down to the sergeant first class, the boatswain's mate or somebody. who's down there where the rubber meets the road. Let me tell you something. You may not want to do something like that, but you're scared. You're worried. And you're afraid if I don't do this, that's it for me. I'll be out of the service. They could put me in jail, punish me under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, say I refuse a direct verbal order. Then what does my family do back home? Yeah. Are they going to eat? Are they going to be cared for? And this is something that I don't think people understand. The human beings in uniform at the lowest levels, they have to make the final judgment. And they're very reluctant to do things that are illegal. They don't want to. But if they're given an order like that, they stop and think, and look, I'm a little man down here.
Yeah.
This is an enormous machine called the United States Navy or the Special Operations Forces or the Army or the Marines or whatever. They'll crush me. Even if I refuse to do this, will anybody defend me? Will I get a fair hearing in a court of law? Let me tell you, there's no certainty when you go into court, whether you're in the military or not, that you're really going to get a fair hearing. I know everybody believes that. You may have a shot at it, but I've seen this in action. And I testified on behalf of soldiers that were wrongly accused. And fortunately, I was the senior officer, and they had to pay attention to me. Because if I hadn't gone in there and testified for them, some of those people would have ended up in jail. And they could have been there for a long time. All I'm trying to tell you is the fish rots from the head. Don't crush the poor people down at the bottom level. You know, you can admonish them for whatever they did. You can reprimand them or something. You go after the people at the top who issued the illegal order. They must be dealt with.
Do you think this Admiral Bradley, Secretary of War Hegseth, what should happen to them?
I think that if the Admiral unhesitatingly agreed and obeyed the order and issued it, should be removed, pending court-martial. And I think Secretary Hegseth should be suspended immediately from his position as Secretary of Defense, pending an investigation. I didn't say they should be punished because I don't know all the facts. I don't know actually what went down. All I know is what you know, which is what's being reported through the media. And you and I and Natalie know enough about the media to exercise a certain amount of restraint when it comes to wholeheartedly embracing whatever they say. But in the meantime, those actions as a minimum should be taken.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for explaining that in practical terms, because for those of us who've never sat in a room like that, who've never taken commands that way, it would be easy to judge, and we need that context. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, especially for the guys just pressing the drone button or whatever, like the little guy who, you know, who's a 21-year-old who's just following, you know, down the line. I totally understand that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Colonel, thank you so much, as always. We hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. And if we don't get to see you beforehand, I hope you have a wonderful Christmas as well. Thank you so much, Colonel. Great to see you.
Keep the fires burning there in the fireplace. Stay warm.
We will. It's going to get cold. Thank you, Colonel. Merry Christmas to you. Thanks so much.